The last chapter for this unit, Unit 2, is going to be photosynthesis. We just talked about cell respiration. Well, just the opposite of that is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is a process that feeds the biosphere. The biosphere is all the living things on the planet, okay? Without photosynthesis, we would have no food, okay? Photosynthesis is a process that converts solar energy into chemical energy, and the chemical energy is food, sugars, okay? So it all goes back to the sun, like we talked about before. But we don't have photosynthesis, we don't have any food, okay? So it can be direct or indirect, okay? If you eat a burger, you're eating a cow, so that the cow had to eat plants, so that would be indirect, okay? Or directly, we can eat an apple. So indirectly or directly, but photosynthesis, all our food source goes back to photosynthesis, and the entire living world counts on photosynthesis, okay? So if you make your own food, you're called an autotroph, okay? An autotroph would be plants, some bacteria, algae, kind of guys that are green, you know what I'm saying? So if they can make their own food, they're called an autotroph, okay? Autotrophs are called producers. In the biosphere, again, all living things, the producers are anything that can make organic molecules, carbohydrates. So they make it from carbon dioxide, and other inorganic molecules and turn it into basically sugars. They could be polysaccharides, they could be monosaccharides, or they could be somewhere in between. But that's what an autotroph does, is they make organic molecules from carbon dioxide and inorganic molecules, okay? Pretty much all plants are photoautotrophs. In other words, they use light from the sun to make their organic molecules, okay? There's some that can use other forms, but in general, that's the majority, okay? We count on plants to produce organic molecules or food for us, okay? Photosynthesis occurs pretty much in all plants. There's a few plants, believe it or not, that don't have chlorophyll, so they don't, but almost, that's very, very, very rare. Almost all plants produce food. We got algae, certain algae produce food. There's some kind of unicellular eukaryotes, like there's Euglena. So these little one-celled organisms, they will make, and some prokaryotes. There are some bacteria that have them. So you have, it's not just plants. There's other things too. These organisms feed themselves and pretty much everybody else, okay? They make food for all of us. So if we can't make our food, we count on the autotrophs, but the autotrophs also feed themselves. Okay, here's some examples. We got our plants. We got multicellular algae. Okay, here's the unicellular ones. I was telling you, you can see they have little green, they have little chloroplasts inside. Cyanobacteria would be like blue-green algae. Okay, you can see they have some. Now theirs aren't organized, but they still have that ability to make them. And there's even some sulfur bacteria, purple sulfur bacteria. There's a few bacteria that'll do that. But these are the guys, usually algae and plants. Those are the ones we really count on. Okay. Now, if you don't make your own food, you're called a heterotroph. So that's what we are. Animals are heterotrophs. They cannot make their own food, so they got to count on somebody else to make food for them. Okay. Heterotrophs are the consumers. So autotrophs are the producers. Heterotrophs are the consumers. Okay. Almost all the heterotrophs, including us, depend on photoautotrophs. If it isn't for those guys, we got no food. Plus, they also make oxygen for us. Okay. So they're really important to us. If we don't have plants, we die, because they give us food and they give us oxygen. Two things we need to live. Okay. Even our earth, our fossil fuels that we use, which is causing problems for plants. Crazy, right? But what they were formed from organisms that died hundreds of years ago. So these were plants that got squished and pushed down into it. And then they were put under a lot of pressure and heat, and they changed instead of, the solids. Well, some are like coal, but you've got these liquids now. So our supply of fossil fuels were really plants that died hundreds of millions of years ago, and they got squished in the below layers and layers and layers of stuff. So fossil fuels are stores of solar energy as well, but from a distant past. That's why fossil fuels will run out someday. Okay, they're under there, but eventually we'll run out of them. It doesn't seem like it in North Dakota, does it? Because we've got it everywhere. But Someday we'll run out of them. Okay. All right. So photosynthesis converts light energy into chemical energy of food. So it goes from light to chemical. All right. The structure that does that is called the chloroplasts. They're the green things that you find in plants. Okay. They're similar to, and they are likely to evolve from photosynthetic bacteria. Sorry, I got to throw the toy because the dogs are being obnoxious. They always do this as soon as I start recording. Okay, so chloroplasts are kind of like, you know, they've traced them kind of back to photosynthetic bacteria. Just like the mitochondria is like a bacteria, they think the chloroplast came from it as well. Okay, the organization of the structural organization of the little chloroplasts, the organelles, they allow for chemical reactions. Again, just like the mitochondria, I had little cristae and stuff for reactions to occur. Well, same thing in the chloroplasts. They're set up for these reactions to occur, which is really good for us, right? Okay, so the site of photosynthesis in plants is the chloroplast, the green things. Okay, the major location of photosynthesis is going to be in especially older plants, the leaves, because, sorry about that, they're the green part. Okay, if it's a young plant, you've got the stems as well, they're green, but the leaves are going to be the major sites of photosynthesis. Okay, chloroplasts are found mainly in cells, what they call the mesophyll. It's the interior tissue of the leaf. Okay, if you take a botany class, you'll really talk about all these parts, but the chloroplast, excuse me, get out of here, go. God, dogs. Anybody want 2 dogs? Let me know. I got 2 that I can give you. They're driving me crazy. Anyway, chloroplasts are mainly found in the cells of leaves, and they have different layers. There's a middle part called the mesophyll, and that's where you mostly find the chloroplasts. Each mesophyll cell, okay, so you have these cells that make up this middle part, have 30 to 40 chloroplasts inside each cell. Okay, and a cell isn't super big, so the chloroplasts, you know, to squeeze all those guys in there is pretty amazing. Okay, carbon dioxide then get to enter into the cell and oxygen leaves. So just the opposite of what we had with mitochondria, right? We want oxygen in and CO2 out. These guys are just the opposite. On the bottom part of the leaves, you'll see these little tiny pores. They're called stomata. And what they do is they allow whatever needs to go in or out. Okay, so if we want carbon dioxide to come in, which plants use, then the stomata open and suck it in. And then we want oxygen to leave so we can use it. Great stuff. That's what happens there too. So they open up and get rid of the oxygen. Okay, so a chloroplast is like the mitochondria in that they have a double membrane, an outside one and an inside one. And they even have a dense fluid inside of the chloroplast. It's called a stroma. There's got to be names for everything. Sorry, you guys, but you know, that's what they do. But there's this dense fluid inside. It's much thicker than cytoplasm, the fluid in a cell. So they call it stroma. Okay. There's something called thylakoids, and I'll show you a diagram that'll probably make more sense. But these are little sacs that are connected in the chloroplast, and they actually have a third membrane system. So you have the inside, the outside, and then you have in the chloroplast itself, you have another part that has a membrane in it. Okay, thylakoids are usually stacked up in columns, and the whole column is called a grana. And again, I'll show you a diagram that'll probably make more sense. So you have different parts to the chloroplast, and again, they have a very important job. Their job is to make food and oxygen for us. Okay, so the pigment chlorophyll is what makes them green. Okay, gives them their color, and it's what absorbs the energy from the sun. Okay, so chlorophyll is very important stuff. If we could make our own food, we would be green, so we would look like Martians, I guess. Okay, but they reside in those membranes, those thylakoid membranes, and I'll show you. Here's a good picture. Okay, so here's a chloroplast. So if you take a leaf and then you look at a little part of the leaf, here's a cross section. So if I took a leaf instead of this way and I put it this way, if I look at this cross section, it's right up here. Okay, you got the top part and the bottom part. And in between, this is your mesophyll that's in the middle. And then you have stacked ones and you have kind of loose ones. Okay, there's where your chloroplasts are. Okay. And their job, again, is to absorb energy, and this is where photosynthesis is going to occur. If you look here on the bottom part of the leaf, not on the top, but you want on the bottom because you want it to stay cooler, these are where those holes are, the stomata, that allow oxygen to come out so we can breathe it, and carbon dioxide to come in so that it can be used in here. Okay, so that's a cross section of a leaf. Okay, so then you're looking at one of these cells. It looks like this. You can see all the chloroplasts in there. There's quite a few. Okay, those are all little organelles that are going to help make food. So let's look at a chloroplast. Okay, inside the chloroplast, remember they have an inside layer and an outside layer. And then in here we have more layers, and these are the thycoids I was telling you about. The little, this is a sac and a sac in each one of these. And when you take the whole stack, that's called a granum. Okay, so this is a granum stack, and each individual little squished sac is called a thycoid. Okay, so you got all these inside of a chloroplast that are in a cell that's in a leaf. Okay, so that's how it gets smaller and smaller. I hope that makes more sense than when I babble about it. Sorry about that. Okay, all right, so if we're going to look at these atoms that are going through in photosynthesis, photosynthesis, like respiration, is a very complex series of reactions, and it needs to be regulated throughout. Kind of like I said with enzymes and stuff when we talked about respiration, well, we got photosynthesis is very kind of this along the same lines. Here's the actual reaction. Okay, we take carbon dioxide and water and light. This comes from the sun. We end up with glucose, our organic molecule, our food, plus oxygen, plus water. See, we need water kind of on both sides. We need water, and we know plants need water, but they also liberate some water too. So we need 12 moles, but we get 6 moles back. So we really only need 6 altogether. Okay, so this is the formula for photosynthesis. Okay, the overall chemical change during photosynthesis is the reverse of cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, we took glucose and oxygen and a little bit of water, but these would be the 2 main ones. And we ended up with carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And that was important. This was the ATP thing we talked about. So the 2 of them are just the reverse of each other. Okay, and if it's in sync, it's perfect because the plants give us glucose and oxygen, and we give them carbon dioxide and water. It's perfect. The 2 of them are just the reverse of each other. Unfortunately, we're kind of out of whack there because we're kind of messing up with the CO2. All right, so what happens then, the chloroplasts split water. They instead of just leaving it as water, they split it into hydrogen gas and oxygen, and then they start using electrons from that. Okay, so the electrons from the hydrogen are, when they split from the water, then they start joining other things and producing, instead of water now you're starting to get your glucose produced. Glucose is C6H12O6, so it's going to need some hydrogen, it's going to need some oxygen, and some carbon. Okay, so if you look at the reaction here, okay, when you split up water, you get some that goes here, you get some water back, and then you get your oxygen over here, the carbon right here. So there's where your 6 carbons are. Okay, you've got 12 oxygen here, so 6 here and 6 here, and then the other 6 come from over here. So it all works out, it's all balanced, and it's just carbon dioxide and water, what plants need, and they produce glucose and oxygen. And this is what we need. This is our food, and of course we need oxygen as well. Okay, where am I at? 13 minutes. Okay, so there's 2 stages of photosynthesis. There's the light reaction, the photo part, and then the Calvin cycle. And some people used to call that the dark reaction, but it doesn't have to be dark for it. So now they call it the synthesis part. So the photo part is where it absorbs light, okay? And the Calvin cycle is where it takes that and starts making the glucose, okay? The light reactions occur in those little stacks. The granum, the whole thing is a granum, but each individual one's called a thycoid. It splits the H2O and then releases oxygen. Okay, we also do, remember we talked about with the cellular respiration, we didn't do a lot with it, NADP and all that. We're, just know that they're important molecules, and I'm not going to get too much into the chemistry of that because there's enough already to learn about it. Okay, and the last thing, it generates ATP from ATP. ADP, photophosphorylation, it was oxidation in our other one, but now they do it in a different way. So we're done with notes for today, and we'll hit it up again. We'll hit photosynthesis later.